Hi, I'm Deb, and this is Debsbeeing. Welcome to another video. Today I'm going to show you how I made this dress. So when I started making this dress, I knew that I wanted to make a dress that had princess seams and maybe be a bit longer. I called it my princess dress when I was planning it. It didn't turn out to be as princessy as I expected it to be, but I still like the way that it turned out. I especially like the pockets. The pockets are amazing. They have so much space, they look cool, and they're just like the best pockets. I made this dress by trial and error, so there are a few mistakes along the way. I take the dress, parts of the dress off a few times, at least twice. Here's the process I went through for making this dress. So I started out at By Hand London circle skirt calculator and filled out my preferences. I wanted a half circle skirt about 20 inches long. My waist is 31 inches. The calculator then tells me my waist radius as well as the length radius. It also shows you how to cut it out on your fabric. I folded my fabric in half and marked out my waist radius at 9.5 inches, and length radius as long as my fabric would allow, and I cut it out. I was left with 2/4 of a circle, and I cut one of the quarters in half for my zipper. Then I measured the base of the skirt for a ruffle. 1/4 is 48 inches. I times that in 2 for the full half circle skirt, then times it again by 1.5 so that I'd have a nice ruffle. I cut my ruffle out at 10 inches high in 3 pieces because that is all my fabric allowed. Then I traced a rectangle around my hand for pocket. I cut 4 pocket pieces out. For the bodice, I folded my fabric in half twice lengthwise. I measured up 21 inches for my bodice length and 10 inches in from the fold. This will make a baggy bodice for me. My bust is about 37 inches and this makes a 40-inch bodice. And this gives me wiggle room. Cut out this rectangle. For the neckline, I measured 5 inches in from the fold and 6 inches down, and 4.5 inches in from the corner. I connected these markings into a curve. For the arm size, I measured 2 inches in from the edge and 8 inches down, sketching a J shape to join the marks. I cut these out. Laying out my skirt pieces, I pinned and sewed down the side seams. I did a straight stitch and then a zigzag stitch to finish the edges. I also pinned my ruffle pieces together and sewed a straight stitch and zigzag stitch down the seams. Then I hemmed the bottom of the ruffle and gathered the top of it. I pinned the gathered edge of the ruffle right sides together with the skirt and stitched them together, finishing the edges with a zigzag stitch. Folding one of the bodice pieces in half, I cut along the fold to make installing the zipper easier. Then I laid the bodice pieces together and sewed them at the shoulder and side seams. I flipped the bodice inside out and matched up the zipper seams. Using my sewing clips, I clipped then pinned this seam together at a 1/2 inch. This is to simulate a zipper so that I don't take in the bodice too much. I don't have a dress form, so I fit dresses on myself. I started with the shoulder seams, pinching them until they laid flat on my shoulders and pinning the new seams temporarily in place. Since I wanted princess seams, I made a line down for my nipple and took the seam in there. I pinned the new seam in place, curving it over my breast and into the armhole. I repeated on the other side, trying to keep it as even as possible. I got my mom to take out the pins and release me. Then I laid out my bodice and smoothed out the pin seams so there wouldn't be any unseemly bunching. I sewed carefully just outside my pinned lines to make the seams permanent, and I cut away the extra fabric, zigzagging to finish the seams. I also cut this bottom flap away and cut the armholes into a smooth curve again as the new seam marred its shape. I laid out my bodice on my fabric and traced the neckline for a neckline facing, adding an inch to either side for seam allowance. I drew the facing about 2 inches thick and cut it out. I decided I wanted calf sleeves, so I laid out my fabric and folded it in half. I measured 3 inches in from the fold and about 5 inches up and down from this marking. Then I sketched a curve up to the middle and down to the other side in a football-like shape. Then I measured the armhole, which was about 16¼ inches around, and made the length of my sleeve 17 inches by marking 8½ inches on either side of the center. I joined this marking to the curve and made the ends 2 inches thick. Then I cut the shape out. I then copied this shape and cut another out, but that isn't necessary. I didn't need to do that. I zigzag stitched around the outside of the facing, then pinned it to the right side of the bodice and sewed it in place. I snipped the curves and flipped the facing to the wrong side and top stitched it around twice. I clipped the rounded edges of the sleeve together and cut along the fold. I pinned the sleeves onto the bodice, matching up the top of the curve and the shoulder seam, and I sewed that in place. I did a small rolled hem around the sleeves. Laying out my bodice, I pinned the skirt in place right sides together, and I sewed them in place, first with a straight stitch and then with a zigzag. I zigzag stitched, goodness that's hard to say, down both sides of the back seam. I clipped them right sides together and marked where my zipper ends. I basted the top part down with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, then did a straight stitch for the rest of the way. Personally, I hate zippers, so I'm not going to go into much detail here, but I pinned down one side and then sewed down it. Then once that was sewed down, I sewed down the other side and the bottom. Once that was done, I flipped the dress inside out and stitch ripped the basting stitches out. I tried on the dress and I wasn't sure about the ruffle, so I did an Instagram poll and the majority said to remove it. Pockets! I clipped 2 pieces together and sewed most of the way around, leaving space to flip right side out. I clipped the corners, flipped them right side out, and top stitched around. I laid a dress that already had pockets on top of this dress as a guideline and marked where the pockets should be. Then I pinned the pockets in place, being careful that both sides were even, and I sewed around these 3 edges. Here I am cutting off the ruffle. I then re-hemmed the bottom with the simple rolled hem. I decided that I wanted longer sleeves, so I traced out the arm side and drew out a sleeve shape, leaving seam allowance on both sides. I made the top slightly more rounded and curved than it originally was, and cut this shape out. I sewed up the side seams of the sleeves. After I cut out the old sleeves, I pinned the new ones in place by having the dress inside out and sticking the sleeve right side out into the armhole, the top of the curve at the shoulder seam. I sewed them in. I hope that makes sense. It's a little hard to describe, but hopefully the visual helps. After I hemmed the bottom of the sleeves, I was finished. My favorite part of this dress is the pockets. It gives it a bit of an apron vibe, but I dig it. I really like the way this dress turned out, as I said previously. There are two things about it that bother me. One is the hem rolls up for some reason. I think it's because it's like a circle skirt, and I hemmed it wrong for how you're supposed to hem a circle skirt. And I know it's just a half circle skirt, but it still has that curve all along the hem. And I guess I did that wrong because the hem curls up the whole way. Not the whole way, but a bunch. You probably saw in the final shots. Anyway, and then the second thing that kind of bothers me about it is in the back, the zipper kind of goes like this, I guess. It's a little lumpy. And I think that's because I should have made the waist a bit higher. It goes below my natural waist, so the skirt rides up to my natural waist, and then that causes the zipper to kind of ripple a bit there. So I could take apart the dress and fix it, but it doesn't bother me enough to do that because I'm pleased with how the dress looks now. I don't know what kind of fabric, what kind of material this is that I used for the dress. It's a woven fabric, but it does have a bit of a stretch. Not very much, but a little bit of a stretch. I got it at the thrift store for just a few dollars, and so that worked for me. I think that this dress looks a bit like Kiki's dress from Kiki's delivery service, but it's a tiny bit more functional, for me at least. Well, I think Kiki's dress does have pockets, but hers are inseam, and they're kind of like magical pockets. My pockets are non-magical pockets because I can't do magic, but they're also kind of an interesting thing for the eye to look at. They're like a neat feature, you know. The sleeves are also kind of like Kiki's, and the color is close, you know, because her dress is blue, and this one's blue. So this dress could work probably for a Halloween costume. For example, Kiki or Kiki from Kiki's delivery service, or Alice from Alice in Wonderland, the cartoon version, not the Tim Burton version, because her dresses are fantastic on that and not as simple as on the cartoon version. But anyway, I digress. I hope you enjoyed this video and seeing the process that I went through to make this dress. And I will see you next time. Bye!